Hello and many thanks for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Tabitha John. Do stay with us. Israel has promised that if any of the Ethiopian immigrants airlifted to Israel in recent months during the conflict in the country are found to have committed war crimes, they will be sent back, Channel 13 reported on Tuesday. The report comes a day after the channel reported that Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed complained in a phone call with Prime Minister Naftali Bennett that some of those airlifted to Israel were officers involved in war crimes. Channel 13 cited a security source involved in the matter as saying at least 4 officers among the over 2,000 people brought to Israel over the past year are suspected of taking part in rebel massacres in the state of Tigray. Amidst condemnations against foreign media biases, Office of the Prime Minister lashed out at CNN for its lopsided and uncorroborated coverage it made about Ethiopia over the past year. A recent example of this is the hysteria it recently caused, as if Addis Ababa had been under siege, sending a global message that the city is about to fall to the invading so-called TDF forces. Bileni Siyum, the press secretary of Ethiopia's Office of the Prime Minister, has explained the realities on the ground to CNN's Becky Anderson. Shifarao Lago presents the following story.
CNN and other major Western media outlets, for that matter, have been propagating erroneous narratives regarding Ethiopia, including the recent sham that the TPLF forces have surrounded Addis Ababa. This is an apparent move to mislead millions of global audience about what is going on in Ethiopia. CNN's Becky Anderson, while speaking with Bileni Siyum, the press secretary of the Office of the Prime Minister, tried to put similar lopsided narratives. The press secretary had to correct this unbalanced narrative from the very beginning.
Before I answer your question, it would be quite disingenuous of me to respond to your question without first addressing the big elephant in the room. And it's important for me to share with you, as well as your global audience, that Ethiopians, a majority of Ethiopians in Ethiopia as well as abroad, strongly feel that CNN has covered the conflict over the past year in a manner that is highly biased and detached from context. And a recent example is the hysteria that CNN had caused last week, as if Addis Ababa was under siege, sending a global message that the city is about to go down. And we have often shared that it seems Ethiopia is undergoing what seems like a coordinated media campaign to tarnish the image of the country, to tarnish the image of the Prime Minister and his administration. And media outlets like CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, and Reuters in particular, as well as others, have often chosen to carry an overly negative and skewed narrative, missing important nuances.
The other wrong narrative still hung on to by CNN is the wrong notion of the battle going on between the government and the terrorist group. Bileni has also had to rectify this issue as follows.
Again, facts and the way that the narrative is being shaped by your media as well is important, because that's not the case. The Prime Minister
So how would you describe it?
By the Constitution to thwart of any attacks on the state, on the integrity of the state as well. The Constitution, if you're willing to go through it, declares that and puts that as a responsibility mandated on the Prime Minister. The TPLF is an organ that has been designated by our House of People's Representatives as a terrorist organization. If the TPLF, if you remember in end of June 2021, when there was a unilateral humanitarian ceasefire that was enacted, the opportunity for peace was there. The opportunity, this unilateral ceasefire that was taken by the government was paying heed to the suffering of our own people. And we need to also acknowledge that the people of Tigray are our own people as well. So heeding to the pains that they are undergoing because of the criminal tendencies and the power grab that is being pushed by a small criminal enterprise and a small clique, acknowledging that the unilateral humanitarian ceasefire was considered a joke by the PLF.
Regarding the state of emergency, Bileni has expounded the situation in the following manner.
The enactment of the state of emergency is not to target any particular person based on the identity that they're aligned to. The state of emergency is put in place to protect the Ethiopian people, to protect the residents of Addis Ababa, who have been told with very, very fierce rhetoric coming from the TPLF that we are going to siege or we're going to come into Addis Ababa.
The interview was full of interruptions by the host, which was really sad as it didn't allow Bilani to convey the whole message to the world.
Let me respond to your words because I've given you a chance.
You would have to allow me to finish. This is not a hostile environment to the media.
Hang on. I'm giving you the opportunity to put your side.
As such, it was an unwise and blatant attempt to deny millions of global viewers their right to know the reality on the ground. And this is apparently part of CNN's obsession with one-sided narrative, which it has over and over been repeating, showing also how far the CNN has gone to ignore the entertainment of diversity of ideas for the sake of journalistic realities and reporting the truth. In fact, it seems that the CNN seemingly has lost track of reporting realities since the Trump administration.
Can you give us a question?
Don't be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you
No,
give
I'm
us
not
a
going to give you a
question?
question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you stay categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you stay categorically?
Fossil of our human ancestor, one of the old. Hiking in the Simeon Mountains is a highlight of traveling in Ethiopia.
And empires.
The Grand Renaissance Dam, which is built on the Blue Nile, is set to power a landlocked country.
Amidst growing pressures from the international community against Ethiopia, the barrage of lies by Western media and institutions has continued. Nevertheless, some have started admitting the truth. A case in point is a report by the Amnesty International, which depicts a gruesome picture of women from an occupied town in Ethiopia's state of Amhara, accusing TPLF fighters of raping them at gunpoint and robbing them. The report details the horrific attacks alleged to have taken place in Nifas Mocha, located in northern Ethiopia's Amhara state, in mid-August. Kasahun Chani takes you through the remainder of the story.
Through interviews with 16 women, the London-based rights group detailed a pattern of gang rape, robbery, physical and verbal assault. The report also says fighters with the TPLF looted and destroyed medical facilities in the town. Some of the survivors who spoke to the advocacy group recounted use of ethnic slurs and brutal attacks. Agnes Kalmer, Amnesty International Secretary General, said that the testimonies they heard from survivors describe despicable acts by TPLF fighters that amount to war crimes and potentially crimes against humanity. They defy morality or any order of humanity. TPLF leadership, however, rejected the report. Spokesperson Getachew Reda tweeted Tuesday before the release of the report, saying that it was aimed at establishing impartiality by apportioning gold-beaten fighters on both sides of the conflict. Survivors told Amnesty that the attacks began soon after the TPLF took control of the town on August 12. Local and federal officials said between 71 and 73 women were raped. Meanwhile, the VOA Amharic service also interviewed victims of the attacks. A mother in her 50s who lives in Nifas Moja said a fighter entered her home armed and threatening violence. A mother of 3 in her 30s is another survivor who spoke to VOA Amharic service release on the condition of anonymity. She said the fighters who came to her home to attack her accused her of being married to authorities, and she said she was raped with her children while watching.
The timing may be controversial, but better late than never. Amnesty International reported it has found evidence of brutal acts committed by terrorist TPLF fighters during an offensive in August. For more reflections on this, here is Jonas Adaye joining us over the phone. Welcome and thank you very much for your time, Dr. Jonas.
Thank you very much indeed.
So how did you find the timing of Amnesty International in revealing the ill deeds of TPLF terrorists this late? Why didn't they bring this to light earlier? Why now?
That's a very important question. But one thing that we should be at least grateful is that Amnesty International has now come to its sense to tell the truth. I'm happy that it has got this courage to show the world what has been done so far. And why now is quite interesting. I think better late than never, as we say. There are a lot of circumstances why they should report at this time rather than previously. So you can just very quickly see what the UN Human Rights reported. You can also think of Karen Bass from State Department, from U.S. State Department. So now it is very difficult for them to all the time keep the truth down there. It is, as the Amharic saying goes, you can't hide after having stolen a camel because it is visible. So that the truth is just coming, large. It's looming large in the whole world. I hope has started to see on the tip of the iceberg. And so, to my understanding, then, I think Amnesty International has come to its sense, and the timing, as already we said, almost the ones that have been supporting now no more supportable anymore, and it is almost a defensible case that they have been supporting. And I think, to my understanding, the truth has started to dawn, just like a sun gradually rises, and then we can see the light even better and more and brighter.
Yeah, totally. So atrocities continue to happen all over the country by this rebel group. What can you tell to responsible bodies in terms of unveiling and preventing atrocities?
I just would tell almost all those who have been backing the rebels, and at the same time the very rebels themselves, that it definitely does damage to them particularly. And it doesn't help to always hide the truth. And this too has come to pass. And simply, peace is indivisible. If there is peace in Ethiopia, the peace dividend can also be shared across Africa and the world. So may they come back to their sense and stand with the Ethiopian government and other peace-loving countries so as to support Ethiopia and rebuild the nation rather than fueling the fire and at the same time helping the helpless and the hopeless.
All right. On behalf of our audience, thank you very much, Dr. Jonas Adaye, for your briefing. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much indeed, and good night.
The terrorist TPLF soldiers kidnapped the Archbishop of Waghimra and Canada Archdiocese, His Grace Abuna Bernanas, in Sekota town, state of Amhara. The Association of Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church priests in North America stated that Abuna Barnabas was snatched by the terrorist armed men from the seat of Waghimra Archdiocese located at Sekota town. His Grace Archbishop Barnabas was coordinating humanitarian support to people affected by the terrorist TPLF in Waghimra administration zone of Amhara state. The association added that the TPLF force tortured the archbishop brutally. His Grace Abuna Barnabas, a venerated religious father who spent his whole life in prayer, fasting, and humanitarian activities and teaching the gospel to the faithful. A year ago, civilians in Maikadra were brutally murdered by Tigray Samri youth group. And adding insult upon injury, there were also grave human rights abuses. Let's take a look at the following video.
እስካሁን ባደረግነው ምርመራና ማጣራት በሰበሰብነው ማስረጃ ቦታው ላይ ተገኝተንም ራሳችንን በተመለከትነው ባየነው በተረዳነው በተገነዘብነው መጠን እጅግ ከፍተኛ የግፍ የጭካኔ የሲቪል ሰዎችን በብሔር ማንነት ላይ መሰረት አድርጎ አሰቃቂ በሆነ መንገድ የመጨፍጨፍ አይነት ወንጀል ነው የተፈጸመው።
Oh wow. Yeah, this is beautiful.
Welcome to the city of Bajaj, the double J city, Jijiga.
Welcome back again. Despite attempts to portray itself as the champion of justice in Tigray, the terrorist TPLF has always been the #1 enemy of the Tigrayan people. For far too long, TPLF thugs wrote Tigrayans a great deal of socio-economic problems, making the majority of the people dependent on aid. While the party was ruling the nation for 27 years, TPLF members could not change the lives of the Tigrayan people, but sucked Ethiopia's economy and deposited looted money in foreign banks. The TPLF is also blamed for concocting every ideological and political tool to separate Tigrayans from other Ethiopians and Eritreans and to inculcate a fake feeling of superiority among them. Let's take a look.
Established back in 1975 to champion the cause of ethnic equality, the TPLF soon embraced the idea of independent Tigray Republic. However, the terrorist TPLF was no champion of democracy even in Tigray, as it purged its own members and assassinated Tigrayans who stood in its way. The very organization that the Western media outlets try to portray as a Tigrayan force is actually the #1 enemy of the Tigrayans. Under its watch of 27 years, Tigrayans have remained as poor as ever, and 2 million Tigrayans continue to depend on international food aid. The TPLF succeeded in deceiving Tigrayans into supporting it by a continuous barrage of propaganda on Tigrayan superiority over the other Ethiopians. In public address in Mekelle, Meles Zenawi used to say Tigrayans were gold and often boasted he was proud to be the son of the gold people of Tigray. The implication is, of course, all other Ethiopians are base metal, less worthy than Tigrayans. Members of the TPLF normally refer to the Amhara as donkey and the Oromo as simpleton. The TPLF has used every ideological and political tool to separate Tigrayans from other Ethiopians and to inculcate in them a belief in their ethnic superiority. This propaganda has paid off handsomely for the TPLF. First, it justifies in the eyes of Tigrayans that only the TPLF has the right to rule and other Ethiopians have to be content with marginalized roles. Thus, in 1991, the TPLF formed the EPRDF, a coalition of ethnic parties organized and led by the TPLF. The ethnic parties were forced to be junior partners in the loose coalition. The belief of Tigrayan ethnic superiority is the foundation of TPLF politics. This sense of ethnic superiority is palpable in the Twitter, Facebook, and the YouTube commentaries the Tigrayan elites post. It is openly expressed in private conversations as well. Second, the TPLF uses its claim of Tigrayan ethnic superiority to make Tigrayan hostages to its rule by continuously evoking the specter of Tigrayan genocide. It interprets any critique of the TPLF as an existential threat to Tigrayans. The TPLF is now in 2021 resorting again to the same genocide discourse to mobilize Tigrayans to overthrow the democratically elected government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. And as before, the genocide propaganda is working. The fear of genocide that the TPLF has inculcated in Tigrayans is making them participate blindly in the destruction of Ethiopia. Nevertheless, many of Tigrayans are waking up after an ideological intoxication that lasted more than 3 decades. And Tigrayans are discovering the damage that the TPLF has done to Tigrayans through the damages it has inflicted on Ethiopians. Haki Subhat, son of the infamous TPLF tag Subhat Nega, recently exposed the machinations by the TPLF against the Tigrayans themselves.
Tigrayans should not die only for protecting TPLF and their authority and wills. Children should not be recruited to war. Tigrayan youth must be saved from this war and they shall be engaged in development programs. The war is induced by few TPLF members, so we Tigrayans must stop this.
The TPLF is a hatmonger and a political gambler to such an extent that Tigrayans living in Addis Ababa recently accused it of masterminding attacks against innocent civilians.
One thing I can tell you is that as we discuss the issue here, a number of our brothers and sisters are dying fighting alongside the TPLF. There is peace for Tigrayans residing here in Addis Ababa. I am speaking from the bottom of my heart. A great many of our brothers are paying a price. If this is a strategy to get the return for the sacrifice of the Ethiopian sons like General Haile Mariam, let me beg you, please surrender to the National Defense Force and save your life and that of other Tigrayans.
The writer urges the entire Tigrayans to get organized to repair these self-inflicted damages, which are going to be an uphill battle for the Tigrayan elites living in a self-imposed psychological isolation.
The state of emergency recently put into effect by the Ethiopian government is said to help remove TPLF's well-structured machinery across the nation. The remark was made by advisor and commentator on democratic and peace building Adam Kasi. Meanwhile, paid TPLF lobbyists and those nostalgic of its regime rejected the joint report of Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the UN. Goshu Melissa brings us up to speed.
The international community and established media outlets shy to condemn the TPLF's grave atrocity on innocent civilians. If the federal army attacked the TPLF, all pro-TPLF groups come out from their burrows and whispered here and there. Speaking on Al Jazeera's Current Affairs of Ethiopia, Adam Kasi said the state of emergency came at the right time, adding it helps destroy TPLF's well-structured machinery across the nation.
In terms of the emergency, and we cannot deny that the TPLF has supporters across the country. It's a very coordinated, well-structured machinery. And part of the struggle to contain them must include detentions that may be necessary.
A well-known paid agent and TPLF lobbyist William Davison from Kenya and the TPLF agent Isaias Haile Mariam cried foul regarding the joint report of UN and Ethiopian Human Rights Commission.
The joint investigation, we don't even know what the terms of reference are. We don't know the Torah. and there's no institutional and personal independence of the process.
Saying the TPLF triggered the war, Adam unveiled that the mafia group committed massacres against innocent civilians over and up being responsible for war crimes.
The violence actually started by the TPLF. They not only attacked the defense forces, which they at least justified as part of their security operations, but the largest massacre in this particular incident since the conflict started, including against civilians, was actually started by the TPLF. It started in Maikadra a few days after the conflict erupted, and hundreds of civilians were massacred by TPLF and its affiliates.
The TPLF pundits and its cohorts are busy portraying the Ethiopian government as undemocratic and suppressive. Their views speak volumes of the TPLF's powermonger nature and how its members work in tandem with some Western media institutions.
The regime in the center assumed power illegitimately, and illegitimately should be removed. And the Prime Minister assumed power through sham election.
The scholar also recalled that when the TPLF controlled back Mekele, attacked the interim administrations and their supporters as traitors.
Water reservoir is a biosphere's paradise. Hippos, crocodiles, monkeys, and a lot of more.
Expedition, acidic pools, and salt lakes. Here, Rock Pinnacle, Abuna Yamatagu, can only be reached via a steep and sometimes terrifying.
And finally, Horn of Africa experts said the terrorist TPLF, backed by Western powers, is waging war against Ethiopia and the Horn at large. The ongoing conflict with the TPLF and its allies is no longer an Ethiopian fight, rather a conflict that requires a regional response and support to the Ethiopian government. The experts, journalist, Ethiopian community organizer, Eritrean community representative, Somali political analyst, emphasized East African countries should support the Ethiopian government to thwart TPLF's terror advance. Daniel Kasahon tells you more.
The people in the Horn of Africa should understand that the current conflict is not only about an Ethiopian war. The terrorist TPLF has been causing tremendous human suffering in Amhara and Afar states as the group is expanding its aggression. The TPLF is a group of few oligarchies and cliques of people who have a huge amount of interest to expand their bellicose approach, and they are backed by Western powers. Following this, Western powers support particularly Biden administration's hostile move to the Horn of Africa as well as its foreign policy decisions.
More than ever before, the Horn of Africa in general and Ethiopia in particular are at a crossroads. This is a region that has been a flashpoint for confrontation among major powers since time immemorial. And the brazen assertiveness of ethno-nationalist and terrorist groups, such as the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, and the Oromuma violent fanatics in countries like Ethiopia.
For the analysts, this unwanted support from the Western countries and their ill-intended media narrative is emboldening the terrorist TPLF.
That the Biden administration has recently taken draconian measures against the Horn of African country, Ethiopia. In the eyes of many observers, this has heralded a troubling shift in the determinants of U.S. diplomacy concerning the region.
The ongoing conflict with TPLF and its allies is no more an Ethiopian fight, rather a conflict that requires a regional response and support to the Ethiopian government.
The real drivers of the uncanny measures imposed on this Horn of African country appears to be personal connections, shrouded in a lofty humanitarian veil, rather than the advancement of a coherent framed foreign policy. It's common knowledge that over the 3 decades the TPLF was in power, it had successfully forged and nurtured friendships with powerful officials, journalists, and intellectuals in the West. Currently, powerful diplomats and officials from the Clinton and Barack Obama era, as well as relatives of TPLF officials, are in key positions of the Biden administration. These TPLF friends who are now holding critical offices in the State Department and National Security Council in the Biden administration are unabashedly expressing their support to the group.
As a result, the entire Horn of Africa should stand together and take pragmatic action against the terrorist TPLF, which has been striving to regionalize its terror ambition. The United States should be mindful of the fact that sanctions and other corrosive tools against Ethiopia will have counterproductive effect in the entire East Africa region, one of the important geostrategic regions in the world. Ethiopians who live around the world are condemning the unwarranted pressure by the Western world. The analysts called on East African countries to stand alongside Ethiopia.
You're watching ID's News Hour. A quick reminder of the day's headlines.